Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very last session of Connecting Communities Through Story. It's hard to believe that as we've journeyed through the first part of 2024, we've met each month to connect as a community of practice and to share ideas. And I know that I've been so grateful for that. I want to share that I am joining in on the unceded and traditional territories of the Hunkaminam speaking people, upon which the Musqueam people continue their cultural traditions and teachings. Lauren?
And I'm Lauren McLean, everyone. I'm coming to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coquitlam First Peoples, and I'm very grateful to be living, working, and raising my children here.
Mhm.
There we go.
And just a reminder about our goals for our monthly session is just to build our community of practice, to connect through each of our learning stories and to continue growing as individuals. We're grateful for this community. And again, we have grounded our thinking and planning through the spirals of inquiry. In terms of each step of the spiral, we know that we have woven that into our own practice. And today actually is the perfect theme as we go through our spiral of inquiry and continue with that reflection and circle in the checking phase of our spiral. So we're really excited for that today.
And
So,
so, yeah,
oh
the
yeah,
reflections piece. So sorry, April, you and I are both so excited to talk about this.
you go.
We have sort of a few slides on the purpose of the reflections. So from the teacher's point of view, we were sort of thinking and excited to see how it differs or extends when Jen gets into sort of the meat of this, the professional growth behind it, the enhanced teaching practices. I know for myself on a day like today, the stress reduction and promoting that well-being, that we are focused on better student understanding. It's not just a one-way pathway, the collaboration and community building as well. You want to talk about that one,
Sure.
April?
And for students, it's a way for us to support them in deepening their learning, understanding their personal growth, and being aware of who they are as learners and really situating themselves within the learning and within our context of place. It supports social and emotional development, and it also supports the idea of metacognition, thinking about our goal setting, what are the next steps, and it ties so beautifully into our curriculum as well.
And then I know as Jen will get into this idea of reflections and how it connects with Circle. I know when April and I were co-teaching, we noticed how well it helped us develop our community with our classroom. It really helped build that trust and that safety, even with our kindergarten students. The enhanced group dynamics, it really brought us together and improved, it scaffolded it, and it just seamlessly integrated all areas of social emotional learning. And again, because of the nature of a circle, how it promotes equity and inclusion. Yay, and we've got Jen Morgan. I might be biased because she's from my district here in Coquitlam, but she's a restorative practices mentoring support teacher. And I'll let her tell us a little bit more about herself, and then we'll have eager ears listening and lots of questions at the end.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, April, for that lovely introduction. Happy to be here with you today to chat about something I'm very passionate about. So, who am I and what am I doing here? So, I'm a mentor support teacher. That's part of my role. I'm a restorative practitioner. I have training in restorative practices through the International Institute for Restorative Practices in not only circle work, but also restorative conferences. So when things go wrong, when there's conflict, bringing people together when there's harm. I am a mother. I am a daughter, a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a pickleball enthusiast. and I'm a colleague. And so, we have all of these roles that we keep. And, I also want to acknowledge my ancestors, my grandmother, who is 103 and still is here today, Norma, and her husband, Jack, who is no longer here, and my grandmother, Myrtle, and my grandfather, Bob. And so I want to acknowledge them as well today. So lots of roles, and I'm excited to be here to tell you a little bit more about my passion. So restorative practices, it's emerging. It's been around for a while, but also in some ways emerging. And so sometimes we might hear restorative justice, which is usually wrapped around our systems that we have. And restorative practice is usually when we talk about strengthening community and relationship. So we know that humans are hardwired to connect. We know that that is the very basic, that we want to have a sense of belonging. And this restorative practices, sometimes folks think that it's just when things go wrong and we need to have a circle to solve problems. But actually 80% of restorative practices is community building, the proactive community building, and 20% is where we respond to harm. And, even in my work now, as I've been doing this for 3 years, I was a middle school teacher for 22 years and a mentor support teacher for the last 3. In the work that I've been doing in the district, that is definitely holding true, that a lot of the work is that proactive community building, and about 20% is when things go wrong. And so there are deep roots within our Indigenous communities. The Maori people also really a big part of that restorative conferencing piece when things go wrong. Of course, our nations here in North America around circle work and just being in relation with each other, right? In relation with the land, in relation with each other. And so there is that roots within the Indigenous communities as well. And so before we get into that, just a little bit of a story of how I came to be where I am today. When I first started teaching in middle school about 25 years ago, I started doing something called class meetings, right? Where we do this, our class meetings. It was Friday. We would meet together and it would have a structure to it. Students would share, someone would be responsible for sharing a funny joke. We would have a box where students would put some problems that we wanted to problem solve together. We would do compliments every single Friday. And I realized that actually that was the huge community builder in the class. I had a feeling that that was the case, and I continued doing them every year, and I started to increase them. I started to increase circle work. So instead of just a class meeting, although it might follow that routine, I started doing 2 times a week and all the way up to 4 or 5 times a week in mornings. And I followed my hunch and just continued trying new things. And so really what I'm sharing with you today is things that I have tried, things that I have come alongside colleagues with, and also parts of coming alongside our Indigenous communities as well. So it's just, as you grow, you just gather all of these together. So I'm going to share a little bit about that today with you. When we think about circle work, and you both said that lovely in the beginning, a lot of these aspects of circles already, really what you're doing is you're slowing down. First of all, you're really slowing your roll. And being in circle together is where we practice respect. And that's really hard sometimes. I was just saying before that sometimes I'm going into some environments that are having some difficulties, having some trouble. And when you have your guidelines in circle, and respect is one of them, we respect the talking piece, right? We pass it with respect. We respect the person speaking. We listen with respect. We have 2 ears to listen more than we have 1 mouth to speak, right? So we speak with respect and we listen with respect. We speak from our heart and we listen with our heart. And we only tell our own stories outside of circle. And so when we're practicing those guidelines, we really are setting those, those expectations for students and adults to follow, anyone that's in the circle. So we're really practicing that respect piece. That equality or equity piece, right? It's really, we're flattening the power structure there. So we always say to students, we're all equal in this circle. I am equal with you. Now that means if something goes, I'm the adult. If something happens, of course, I'm going to spring into action, but we are equal. And so anyone that comes into this room, whether it's the principal, an EA, a parent, you know, anyone is welcome to join and will be in the circle as well. And it gives equal voices, right? We hear our louder folks in the circle, and this actually, and adults too, this actually flattens that out where everybody has a chance to be heard, right? Rather than hearing the same voices all the time. It gives other people a chance to speak. And of course, empathy, emotional literacy. Sometimes we're checking in. We're telling a story. It's really about storytelling in circle, even if it is around, you know, what were your highs and lows of the week? What were our pits and peaks? You're telling a story about who you are. And so you're creating some empathy for each other and hearing our stories. We're problem solving. Absolutely. Once we have that structure and we have problems that happen over recess or lunch, we might be tackling those together, facilitated. It might take 45 minutes to do so, but I've just found what a wonderful way to have students co-own what the result is of those problems, rather than me saying, listen, you're supposed to do this and you didn't follow through X, Y, and Z. You know, why didn't you do that? Rather than putting it back into their hands. How are they going to solve the problem? What is the problem? How is it affecting us? How are we going to solve it? And that leads to their responsibility, right? Them having, and even responsibility in taking parts of the circle on. So it's not me necessarily leading every part. I've been in circles where students choose the reading to open, or they lead the rainstorm, or they might have ideas for what they want to do in circle, a game or some other activity. So it really gives that shared responsibility. It's hard to sit in circle and listen to every single person. You need a lot of self-regulation and co-regulation. And so what I say to folks, they say, Jan, I can't do 45-minute circle. I say, no, you don't start with that. You start with a 10-minute. Especially with the littles, they're not sitting there for 45 minutes. Can grade 8 do it? 100%. Absolutely. They can do it every day. But you lead up to that, right? And you co-regulate with them. And if you need to have another adult, ask your learning support person or a counselor, they can come in and help you with that. That's another tip that can work really well. And then we talked a little bit about that shared leadership. Circle, there's a picture there of an outside circle. A lot of schools now are putting pieces of granite or logs outside. So once students are ready and have practiced, they should probably practice first in class so you can have some parameters. You can easily move it outside. It is a bit more distracting, but as you know, you both are very good about, you know, putting in parameters when we go outdoors. It's the same thing. How do we move this outdoors? And what do we do in this outdoor space? And take advantage of where it is on the land as well. So when I look at circle practice, some folks might feel like, oh, I'm not Indigenous. How can I do circle in my classroom? And I'm very open about that in circle. I'm not Indigenous. Any teachings that I receive from my Indigenous colleagues, always give credit and I always ask permission. And in talking to Indigenous colleagues, they want you to try. They want you to try things. And if you make mistakes, it's okay. Very gracious about that. And also we're looking at this idea of two-eyed seeing from Albert Marshall, Mi'kmaq Elder. This two-eyed seeing is really, we have this Western knowledge. And so that might be part of my circle work, is my Western view of circle, but also the Indigenous knowledge and really honoring that piece of it. That's where the root of it is. And some circles might go with that Indigenous knowledge, which I'll show in a moment of some of the teachings I receive. And some circles just being in circle, right? That piece, you're still honoring the Indigenous knowledge. You might be doing something in circle that's not Indigenous per se, but you're honoring that Indigenous knowledge. You're honoring the way the circle goes. So for Coquitlam, it's in a counterclockwise. So you're honoring that part of your circle. And then the last part that came to my practice, the very last piece I added was a centerpiece. And the centerpiece is grounding. A lot of teachers say it really helped their students focus on something else with that rather than looking at each other. Sometimes that can be a bit vulnerable. And so our pieces in the center reflect our community and the circle keeper. And so this was an artifact circle. And so some were artifacts that the circle students brought, and some were pieces that I brought into the circle, like the antler. You always tell the story of each piece, right? And the students love to hear the story about why that piece is there and what the meaning is. Our plant, our live, something live in the middle, to remind us we're all connected. We're all connected. We're connected in nature. We're connected to each other. Everything has a reaction, an interaction. And so there's a live plant in the center, and I try to keep it alive through all the different, it lives in my car a lot. So I just brought it in for a little watering today. So those were the last pieces that I put into place. And actually, teachers that I work with now really feel like that is an anchoring piece, that and the guidelines as well. So I wanted to share that. When we look at our types of circles, you're really, again, back to the, some people would say before, Jen, we have a problem, we have to jump into circle and solve it. But what I would say is, unless it has been done already in class in a proactive way, we can't jump in to solve problems because they're not used to the structure. It's a really vulnerable place to be. And so we start with very low level circles, getting to know each other. We're building that routine. So sometimes in September, you're building that routine, you're doing some light check-in questions, and you're playing a game at the end, because having fun together in circle is also community building, right? And carry that on through the year. We don't stop in September and October once we get to know each other. Carry on and have some of that circle fun as well. And then as we can get a little deeper, right? We can talk about our names and who are we, our identities. We can talk about our goals. What are our goals? What do we need to do better? What are we working on? What are our strengths and stretches? We can do curriculum in circle. Sometimes that also is a way that folks feel comfortable with. They can bring something that they would have read into circle and with a reflection activity. And then, of course, as we go, the more the problem solving, the conflict, and addressing harm. And so you're always in this cycle of getting acquainted. You're building that relationship. Any issues that happen, the idea being that anyone is welcome back. We want to have folks feel and kids feel like they can always come back into the circle. And so when you practice that, weekly, or maybe you're doing it a few days a week, taking the time, it does take time. And that's something I get a lot too. How do I don't have time. If we really think about decolonizing our classrooms, time is a construct that we really need to think a little bit more about. I have a book that I want to recommend at the end, but when we think about that time piece, if we put it into our schedule, we can really take the time to do that. And some would say when you're taking the time to do that, you actually get to more learning in the end. What I've been working on recently is looking at our First Peoples Principles of Learning that we have in BC. And the First Peoples Principles of Learning was formed by elders, by scholars, by knowledge keepers. And these are their First Peoples Principles. It's not an extensive list, but you might see these posters a lot in classrooms and in schools. And it was the First Nations Education Steering Committee that came up with these principles of learning. And so, they're wonderful ways to unpack them and talk about them in circle. And so what I've done is made up some posters to put in the circle. So we're making it a bit more explicit that Learning is embedded in memory, history, and story. And today we're going to do an artifact circle around that. We're going to talk about our stories. What are we connected to with this artifact? And how do we connect with each other on these artifacts? So each principle of learning, I've grouped some of the circles that I've done in different schools. A lot about identity, right? Who are we? What does our name mean? Where does it come from? Maybe doing a marked discussion around that. What are our strengths? What do I value? Looking at the well-being of self, family, community, land, spirits, and the ancestors. So talking about place, where is that place that's super important to you? It could be just, maybe you like to be by the mountains, or there's a trail, or maybe there's a specific place like Parksville or somewhere in the Okanagan. And maybe also to add on to that, who are the people of that place? What nation lives there? Right? So you're really linking in our identities and also our principles of learning. And so even the grandmother circle, that was a teaching that was gifted to me to share in my circles. Or sometimes it's just things that I've done for a lot of years, like the compliment circle, really looking at our strengths and who do we want to notice today. And so by making that more explicit, it keeps it alive. It's not just a poster on the wall. I was really, I lived with the poster for a little bit, would dig into it. And then I wanted to do something with it. So it was actually a living document in my class. And so those are some ideas of how to link some circles to the First Peoples Principles of Learning. Of course, it lives in curriculum. So when we think again about circle takes time, it actually lives in curriculum. Our core competencies support that circle work. And so I know sometimes that is, could be a roadblock if you feel like parents are going to question you about it, about why are you doing this? It lives in the core competencies. And actually, all of these are being practiced in that circle piece. Our well-being, a lot of teachers have said, actually, when they get in circle, they feel better, right? It just helps everybody feel calm and connected. And so that well-being piece and that building relationships is important. We're connecting and engaging, right? We're communicating. It's a different way of communicating. It's not written. Not all, we can have written communication in circle, but you are communicating. You're reflecting and assessing, right? We're always assessing, we're always reflecting in that circle time. Maybe if you're about to do a project and you're about to present, you're talking about what our goals are, or maybe what we're proud of, or what we're looking for in those presentations. We break out into our smaller groups. We come back again. What did you notice about those presentations, right? What did you want to give acknowledgement to each other about? Or how do you want to reflect on your own presentation? What was your strength? What was your stretch? So just being really using that structure for any way. And it does live in core competencies and curricular competencies as well. So I like to keep feedback, and this was an early career teacher that really had a difficult year one year. And often those are the situations that I'm involved with. And the next year, so I came in, we did some circle practice, and the next year in September, she had a new class and she started with circle right away. And I really loved how excited she was about that circle and how she took it on, like one for morning and a quick closing circle. She really dug in. And just that noticing piece, this is street data, right? This is that qualitative data that her noticing that those students were kind, open, honest, empathetic, right? That's, what's practiced in circle. And she saw that. And just how much support they had with each other. So she says it's truly heartwarming, and I agree. It warmed my heart as well. So, this is the example of some of the teacher feedback. And then the students, I know at first, sometimes they're like, oh, we get circle, we're not doing math. Oh, that's wonderful. But they will admit that it is something that keeps them connected and that really brings them closer together. You notice this student will say, I won't read it because I know you can read, but this student, builds trust, and that the trust will stay in circle, and a great thing to have a strong community. And just even like compared to the beginning of the year, so noticing that how we grow together as a community from the beginning of the year. So a lot of student feedback about that as well. I'm going to, at the end, show you a book, but this is from Teaching Where You Are. It's a book that I'm currently reading, and I just wanted to read this quote. "We are inseparable from the land, plants, and animals that share our existence. We are inseparable from the spirit world where time does not exist. The ebb and flow of life has its own timing and cyclical order from which we learn natural laws and spiritual laws. In the circle, there's no beginning and no end. Only the mysterious dance of life that happens in the messiness of schooling." And it is quite messy. Just the idea that, even the circle itself, its cycles, its seasons. And don't we definitely go through cycles and seasons throughout our school year? I feel like that right now in June when we reflect. And so this is from a book that really speaks to slow pedagogy and linking Indigenous principles as well. And it really does a lovely job of giving you permission to slow down. I think sometimes that's what we need. We need a little bit of permission to slow down a little, go deeper, right? And another part from the book says, if we think of time only in terms of things accomplished, we will never have enough of it. And so I thought that was a nice grounding quote just to think, because I get there too. I have to do all these things. I have to accomplish all of these things. And so Circle just allows us for that slow down time. So this is, Teaching Where You Are. So weaving Indigenous and slow principles and pedagogies. It's a really great read. It doesn't talk about circle practice per se. It's just more about how do we weave those principles and pedagogies into our own practice. And, I think that's the part about it too, is we're always learning. We always want to learn about, and maybe it's not new to us, but it's a different perspective and a different way to think about where we are in our teaching. And then Circle Forward is a classic. It is quite a large book, so please don't be overwhelmed by it, because it's organized in a very specific way. And so it has some circle plans, and teachers really enjoy this because it helps give them a starting point. And the circle plans go from very lower risk to more higher risk. Like you have to have a pretty deep community to be able to tackle some of the topics near the end. But it also has some openings in the back and some games. And in the beginning, it gives you a nice overview of why circle, a little bit of what I talked about today, but much more detail. And that's by Kay Pranis, who is a circle guru and has a lot of knowledge as well. And I would just say, try different things, try things. That's all. Just try it out, see what works. It's like that spiral of inquiry, right? We're trying new things. We're seeing what works. We have a hunch about something else. We'll try it, we reflect, and then we carry on. So hopefully some of these things have been helpful today. And of course, you can always reach out if you have any questions. It's J Morgan. I should have put it on the slide. That would make sense. jmorgan@sd43.bc.ca. If there's any questions you have, of course.
Jen, you are so amazing. Thank you so much.
I have 2 pages full. I don't know if you can see madly writing. I do have a question for you, Jen.
Yeah.
When we think about circle work with our students, we've got the class of students. And then when we think about it as a staff, have you led circle work with staff before? And how might you imagine it working in terms of like a staff of 50 or 60 people? Would you do it in like smaller circles just to get that trust, or is it possible to do it as a whole? Could you speak a little bit to that?
Of course, yes. Yes, we've done that with a staff of 50 before, and we've done exactly what you just said. Sometimes we've done smaller circles. For example, the artifact circle. We did that with staff, and we had 4 circle keepers. And so they did 4 different circles around the building. And then if you're doing with a staff of 50, sometimes you can create the questions where it's just 1 or 2 words. So you can really, so that there's enough time for everyone to speak. So or the other thing is you could do is a turn and talk. So you could still, circle can also be talking to your partner in those times. So you're still getting that talk time. And then maybe it's a report out of a 1 or 2 words. So it has worked successfully in staffs for sure, for both of those ways to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's really
You-
helpful. Yeah.
Do you ever, like with younger kids, if there is still 22 students and it's taking a while because we're telling our lengthy stories, do you ever give body breaks for the kiddos? Okay. And that's
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of classes I'm in now where that's exactly it. We started in between rounds. We did 2 rounds. So a round is, when you each say your answer. And then, okay, I'm sensing we need a body break. And then they knew, do you need a body break? Yeah. And they'd stretch. And they're really great. You give them a 30-second to a minute body break and they'll come back into their seat and they're ready to go again. So
Yeah.
that's a really great idea to bring up, Lauren. So, and you'll find I did it, I'm doing that in a class right now. Eventually they didn't need it. So they kind of grew out of it. The littles
Right.
probably would still need that body break, or you're just doing 1 round, not 2, that kind of thing.
But they've developed that stamina, and because it's become a routine, they know what to expect, I guess.
100%. And if you have a kiddo particularly that needs something, I give them a squishy or something to, and they, they know it's a tool, not a toy, and how to do it without being distracting and all of those things.
Yeah.
And even I've had a student before who's really had a hard time in circle. And so we worked it out ahead of time that if they needed a break, they could go get a drink of water and they could come back. So even though one of our guidelines is remain in the circle, we all have different needs. And that's a good conversation, as I'm sure, we all have with our students about how we're all unique, right? And so we all have different needs. And it was great. They would go to the water fountain and they would come back, and that was all they needed to do, just to get have a break.
And I remember you said our guidelines. I remember that you had guidelines. Now, do you co-create guidelines with every class that you visit? Or do you have a set that you sort of...
Yeah, I have a set from Circle Forward that was like the speak from the heart, listen with respect. And what one of my classes did this year is they actually did a visual of the guidelines. So they drew out, like they did a storybook for tell your own story outside of circle. They drew a heart. So you can be creative with it. Yeah. Sometimes also often if I've done charter work with the class, I'll put the charter in the middle as well. So how they want to feel safe, included, welcomed. That can also be an anchor point for circle work too. So whatever charter work you've done in your class, that's also a great piece, artifact to put in the middle.
Love that.
I love the idea of the artifact circle.
Yeah.
Like that's something that's like we can do right away. Even with our students, like we've been exploring outside a lot. I do outdoor learning prep as part of my teaching load as well. So even just thinking about like our closing circle, like changing it up a bit. Usually we do our closing circle to reflect on a core competency that has, that we really worked on. But even just maybe choosing one special nature gift and maybe just sharing that gift. And so I really like that. And then that idea of that grounding piece, that's a new idea for me that has really nudged my thinking in terms of what grounds us in our practice and how can we collect the different narratives and stories that are a part of our community.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Beautiful.
you, April. I love that, with finding a gift, from nature and what that means to you and what it reminds you of and what connection do you have with it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording. Is that okay?
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I have another question.
Do you want to ask it first?
Oh, sure. My question is, I mean, most people might want to hear this. We all get that typical, flood of after recess and lunchtime. So even if it's just 4 or 5 students, do we say, okay, yeah, let's have a sort of an impromptu circle to talk about this? Or do I take my 7 kiddos and just have a mini circle while everybody else is drawing or quiet reading? I mean, I do work in primary
Yeah.
grades, so it's easy to do that. They're pretty independent with coloring and stuff, but yeah, I just know today there was a lot of soccer stuff that happened today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done both. If it's really only like an issue that's affecting a few of them, then I will do that separate circle while my other students are reading or doing something else. If
Yeah.
it's affecting the community largely or they were mostly a part of it, then I would definitely do that impromptu circle,
Okay.
which I have done. Okay, I think it's time we need to get together and discuss this. And as we know, things will fester otherwise. So it's better to just take that time away from something else to solve the problem together. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's a
Thank
great
you.
question.
All right, we can end the recording, April. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.